Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Why is it important for us to understand this conversation between Lord Caitanya and Srila Sanatana Goswami? Sanjay wants Trilokanath Prabhu to answer.
Because we should understand philosophy according to, understand Shastra according to, from understanding, not according to our mind.
Why?
Because our mind is such a rascal.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, that's why we must know the true understanding, real way of Shastra.
The real way of Shastra. Chandrika, what's the real way to understand Shastra?
Through the eyes of Shastra.
Okay.
Guru, Sadhu and Shastra.
Yes, Guru, Sadhu and Shastra are very important in order to understand. But let's say, for example, so the example we gave was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, right? He was revered as a guru and a sadhu. He taught the sannyasis. And when he was teaching Lord Chaitanya about Vedanta, he's quoting Shastra. But they weren't actually discussing scripture during that time because there were three things missing. The three things that we always need in order to discuss Shastra. The three things that determine whether or not we're actually discussing Shastra or if we're discussing something according to our whim, our intelligence, our mind. Do you know it now? It's okay if you don't. What if I went like, Hare Krishna, Sambandha Avideya Prayojana? What does Sambandha mean, Chandrika? Because I know you know that.
The connection.
Connection, yes. Relationship.
The relationship between the soul and God.
Right. Good. And Prayojana.
Ultimate goal of life.
Ultimate goal. And Abhideya.
Way how to reach
Yes.
the goal.
The process by which we can attain the goal. Which is prasad. According to Tulsi Prabhu. That's very good. So if we learn how to actually approach and accept Shastra, then we won't be worried about being distracted by the external differences or the details, right? Because if we approach Shastra and we have attachment to any external detail, we're going to have a tendency to bring Shastra in line with our lives, with our point of view. But we're meant to bring our lives in line with Shastra. And so in order to do that, if we understand these three things, the relationship between us and the Supreme Lord, what our ultimate goal is and the process by which we can attain that goal. If we approach all Shastra with that mentality, then we will have a much easier time making spiritual advancement. Otherwise, we will be distracted. Because, as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur points out, there are countless philosophies, but although attempting to reach the truth, they are incomplete and mutually conflicting, being generated from illusory premises. And these philosophies find their perfection in Krishna Bhakti. So, every living entity has the same nature. We all want the same thing. But we're going about it in different ways, depending on what our conditioning is telling us, depending on our conditional experience. But if we tap into that constitutional nature by understanding Shastra in this way, then there's hope. Otherwise, no hope. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has been repeating in many different ways, is once you understand this, once you understand that this material world is no place for a gentleman, there's no way that we can actually attain happiness here. There's no way we can even be comfortable here. Once we know that, even in theory, then we should stop trying to pursue knowledge, stop trying to understand things without knowledge, avidvat pratiti. We need to go to the vidvat pratiti. We should try to our understanding based on knowledge, based on Shastra. And that Shastra has to be understood in terms of our relationship, the goal, and the process by which to get to that goal. So this is going to be a recurring theme throughout this. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues. If it were not like this, could the lowly living entity have a relation of love with God? The Supreme Lord is filled with the highest sport, endowed with free will, and eager for the love of the soul. Yet being the Lord, how can he hanker for human offerings, feel satisfied or become genuinely happy with them? Krishna, the reservoir of sweet pastimes, therefore covers his majestic aspect with sweetness, accepts equality with or subordination to qualified souls in transcendental Vrindavan, and feels bliss. Can anyone who accepts pure love or prema as the highest goal accept anyone other than Krishna as the object of love? Right? So the fact that Krishna, out of love, is willing to become subordinate to his devotee, not willing, he's just conquered. It's not that he wills it and he does it. He basically, it's not a choice for him. And there's no one else that has that character. So, can anyone other than Krishna actually be the object of love? Someone but Krishna can be, like Vishnu, he can be the object of reverence, and there can be some relationship there. But true love, that's Krishna. Continuing. Different languages may not use the same words to describe Krishna, Vrindavan, the Gopas and Gopis, the cows, Yamuna, and the Kadamba trees. But persons interested in pure love must accept some name, place, form, and pastimes, denoting a similar world and God in some way, using some words. Thus, Krishna alone is the object of pure love. Until pure attraction arises in a person's heart, the devotee, with a sense of duty, must carefully cultivate Krishna consciousness by practicing the primary and secondary rules of bhakti. There are two ways of cultivating Krishna consciousness: through rule or duty, vidhi, and through attraction, raga. Raga, attraction, is rare. When raga develops, the path of vidhi loses its imperative. Therefore, scriptures mention these two paths, but the path of raga is extremely independent and individualistic. There are no set rules. Only those who are the most advanced and fortunate can practice raga. As a result, only the rules for the path of vidhi have been systematically presented in the scriptures. So we covered this already, but it's worth mentioning again since Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is bringing this up. There are people who take statements like this and statements in Caitanya Siksamrita that talk about Vaidhi and Rag. Hare Krishna. And they say, well, since Raga is superior and Vaidhi's inferior, then what's the point of practicing the rules and regulations? Let's just one day spontaneously become attracted to Krishna. And some even try to use logic by saying, if we get too caught up in the rules and regulations, then the topmost destination we can reach is Vaikuntha. It says it right in the Caitanya Charitamrita. So out of fear of being stuck in Vaikuntha, let's not practice these rules and regulations, right? But Lord Chaitanya explains it, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains it a lot, is that until we develop this spontaneous attraction to Krishna, we are spontaneously attracted to material nature. And in order to counteract that spontaneous attraction to material nature, we have to follow the process of sadhana bhakti, right? And it's a process that's designed by Krishna, given by Krishna, instructed by direct representatives of Krishna. And if we do it properly, then we become successful. If we don't, then we don't become successful. There's no way that someone can just magically switch from being spontaneously attracted to matter to spontaneously attracted to Krishna. Is there an exception to that, Haladar Mishai? No? Not even one? Nobody was just having lusty feelings and it happened to be towards Krishna?
That Kubja.
Ah, Kubja, yes. So, although there's some sort of possibility, Hare Krishna, it's not something that you want to count on. Yes, Mishai?
There are a few interesting points related with this. One is Srila Prabhupada in the Purport 4, 8, 47, 48. 4th Canto 8, chapter 47 verse. He equates Vaidhi with Pancharatrika Vidhi and Raga with Bhagavata. And Pancharatrika Vidhi means following the 64 principles as given in Bhakti Rasamrita, Nectar of Devotion, we all went through. And interestingly, Bhagavata Vidhi doesn't mention any of the rules, but it only says that you are relating to Krishna in one of the 5 primary rasas. That means it's understood already you are perfected following the 64 principles of bhakti, and by following it you developed a certain level of attachment to Krishna, which is called rati. Technically it is already you are at the level of love of God. You have reached the level of at least bhava, if not prema. And now you are only focused on how to relate to Krishna in one of the 5 primary rasas. Shanta Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. So there is nothing like, okay, there is ambiguity either this or that.
Right.
It is one connected one, like
yes.
you are moving.
Very good, very good. Yes, and this is clear if we actually study the Shastra. It's clear if we actually just read the Shastra in context, honestly. But this material world is full of unscrupulous people, and we have a tendency to adjust Shastra to our point of view. So if our point of view is, I'm going to get the highest benefit without doing a thing, then I'm only going to look at one part of Shastra where it says, this is superior to this, therefore, don't do it, right? We spoke about the stepping stone principle before, where I'm on this side of the river, I want to get to that side of the river. Now there's 2 important things about the stepping stones. What's the first thing? Or what's one of them? Sanjay.
That you shouldn't get attached.
You shouldn't get attached to it. So in other words, when taking the stepping stone across, it has value because it's getting you closer to your goal. But if you become attached to that, and instead of continuing on to the goal, just set up camp on that stone, then you're not really reaching your goal. Very good. What's the other thing?
You shouldn't be detached.
Hmm?
You shouldn't be detached from this.
You should leave the shore.
Right.
You should leave the shore.
Right, you have to leave the shore. So it's important to use and it's important to give up, but you have to do it in the right order. If I give it up before I leave the shore and I say these stepping stones are useless because you have to give them up anyway, I'm not going to reach the other side. But if I put too much value in it, then I'm just going to stay on the stone. Or maybe I'll try to pick it up and bring it with me, or I have too much value. So these are the two extremes. And both of these extremes, by the way, the person isn't understanding their sambandha, their relationship, right? They're using their personal understanding and at least referring to Shastra to try to strengthen their position. But if they actually understood their position, then they would know, okay, you use it and then you leave it and you continue on, right? So this will actually, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is going to bring this up, I think soon. But it's worth repeating because it's something that we all struggle with. We see, even within ISKCON, there are many times where these seemingly controversial topics come up, and there are two sides, and they're always arguing. No, it should be like this. No, it should be like this. If we identify what the motives of those two parties are, whatever the issue is, we can see that a lot of times both are wrong. Sometimes there are some involved in each party that are right, but they have an incomplete understanding of the whole topic. And there are some that understand the whole topic and they're leaning one way or the other. But we have to look at the motive. So if the motive is, for example, I think that we should do it this way because otherwise we look bad in the public eye. Is that the proper way to understand Shastra or an incomplete way? An incomplete way. Same thing, take the other extreme. No, we have to stick 100% to tradition without veering off. That's also an attachment to the stone. So we have to find that healthy balance. There is a lot of value in tradition because that's where the purity comes from, right? It's the descending process. So we have to stay true to that tradition. As Pandava Mashai mentioned the other day, we are simultaneously, and I'm going to try not to mess up this word, we are simultaneously the most liberal, I said it again. I swear I'm not doing it on purpose. Liberal? Liberable. I don't know where that's coming from. Liberal? And the most conservative, because Krishna consciousness is for everyone. Every spirit soul has the same nature, and we're all looking for the same goal. Liberal. So in that sense, we're very liberal. But there's only one process that's actually going to bring us to Krishna, right? So it starts out quite liberal, and then you have to follow the process, though. So gradually we get rid of our attachments, and we just understand, okay, it's not about me, it's about Krishna. So the liberalness is that everyone, no matter where they're coming from, can engage in Krishna service. But when you actually get down to engaging fully in Krishna service, it becomes one path. So, because of that, because it starts out quite liberal and then ends up being quite conservative, we have people who materially, their conditioning was both, each conservative and liberal. And they're attached to those things. And we're all attached, so wherever we lie, on whether we're on the extremes or we're in the middle, if we're attached, the attachment's the problem. It's not the position. The position is whatever, we're dealing with it, right? So one position is not necessarily better than the other. But if we're actually aimed in the right direction and we're on the path, then we're in good shape. So as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur pointed out, even a tribal who doesn't know a thing about anything, if they're properly engaged in Varnashram Dharma, they can come to Krishna consciousness very quickly. Whereas the so-called civilized person who's cultivating knowledge and trying to increase his intellectual prowess and logical another word for prowess, whatever. They will be distracted by the externals because they're actually thinking, okay, I'm becoming very expert in logic, reason, argument, and I'm going to be able to explain this, right? Whereas the simple tribal, who's just being engaged according to his nature in Varnashram Dharma, they're just accepting, so they can go. Is that a hand up or a?
No, I'm just
Okay, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't ignoring you, because I don't have my glasses on. I can't get used to it. Yes. So as Halaram Ashai pointed out, it's just one path, right? So the Raganuga part, the Vaidhi part, that's where we are quite liberal. Because why does it keep happening? Because anyone can practice it. Once we get to spontaneous attraction, it's quite conservative. And then we follow in the footsteps of those who have already achieved perfection. Okay, continuing. Those who unfortunately do not believe in God also formulate rules for maintaining their lives. These rules are called morality. But those moral codes that do not include thought of God cannot accomplish any good for humanity, even though presented skillfully. Such morality is materialistic. Moral codes that express belief in God and oblige service to Him are fit for mankind. Very important. So, because this material world is temporary, we may think that if we change some rules to make people a little bit more moral in our eyes, what we consider to be morality, if it doesn't include God, then it's not addressing Sambandha. It's just about us. It's what we think is good for us, right? And we may feel better about it for some time, but this situation is temporary. So Srila Prabhupada often would warn us that we shouldn't get so caught up in humanitarian work for the sake of humanitarian work, right? In one sense, we do the ultimate humanitarian work because we're trying to get people out of this material world, and that is true humanitarian work. But just feeding people, giving them a place to stay, these are incomplete. So oftentimes, those who are pious, they may even become detached from the material world for some time. But since they have this natural desire to engage in activity, they come back to this material world and they engage in humanitarian work. They open up hospitals and food banks, homeless shelters, things like that. But if we're only treating people's bodily difficulties, if we're not addressing their spiritual needs, we're not really helping them. We may be easing their pain temporarily, but that's not actual help. But we can do both, right? So prasadam distribution, for example, it's very popular. It's a very nice thing to do. It should always be accompanied by kirtan. And we should make sure that we're actually offering. So it's actually prasadam that we're distributing. It's not that we're just, getting a photo opportunity in the local newspaper or television slot of, hey, the Hare Krishnas, they came, after this natural disaster and they've been, feeding these people. No, it should be known. So in Florida, for example, there are a group of devotees, they do what's called Krishna lunch. So everybody knows it has to do with Krishna lunch. It's prasadam, they're getting, they're happy with it. They know that it's related to Krishna. There's kirtan going on most of the time, I think. Haven't been. So we should understand what we're doing, what actually is going to benefit the people. And it has to revolve around God. If it's not, then Shruti Smriti Puranadi, Panchratara Vidhindina, it's going to cause unnecessary disturbance in society if it's not referring to Scripture. And the reason it's going to cause unnecessary disturbance in society is because it will be complete and mutually conflicting, because they will be generated from illusory premises, right? So any philosophy, any idea, any concept, any sense of morality that we have that is not coming through Shastra, it's illusory, right? So it doesn't mean that we completely abandon it. Let's say I see hungry people on the street, it's a problem in my area, I want to help them out, right? Okay, we can feed them, no problem, but we're going to feed them Krishna Prasad. We're going to also chant, right? So like that. It should always come through Shastra, and it should always come along with this understanding of who we are and who Krishna is, what our goal is, and how do we get to that goal. Continuing, unless there are any questions on this. Okay. Rules are of two types, primary and secondary. Those rules that directly lead us to serving and satisfying the Lord are called primary rules. Those rules of life that indirectly support that goal are called secondary. For example, taking an early morning bath is a rule. By doing this, the body becomes fresh and disease-free, and the mind becomes steady. If the mind is steady, you can worship the Lord properly. Here, the goal, worship of the Lord, is not the immediate intention of the bath. The bath's direct result is bodily comfort. If bodily comfort is accepted as the final goal of the bath, then worship of the Lord is not achieved at all. There are many possibilities, intervening results between bathing and worshiping God. Where there are such intervening results, there is possibility of obstruction of the goal. Is vegetarianism a primary rule or a secondary rule? Secondary. Why?
Because we're not vegetarians.
What are we?
Yeah, we just follow what Krishna said, what Krishna wants.
We're Krishnatarians? Yeah,
We were
you are. We're prasadarians.
If Krishna told us to eat something else, we would.
So are you telling me that if I'm following a strict vegetarian diet, I'm still sinful?
Yes.
I am?
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Unless you.
Does anyone know a verse from Bhagavad Gita that proves that? Because I don't know. I'm doubtful. No, you're absolutely right. Yajna shishtasina santo muchante sarva kilbisai bunjate te tvagam papa ye pachantyatmakarna. That the reason that the devotees of the Lord are freed from all kinds of sin is because they eat food which is first offered in sacrifice. It doesn't matter what it is, it has to be offered first. That is what removes the sin. So then it says, others who merely eat food for sense enjoyment, whether it's vegetables or anything else, verily eat only sin, papa, right? So you're absolutely right. Vegetarianism is a secondary rule. So what's the primary rule? Eat only things that are offered to Krishna. Okay. How about, so we already did the bath, we did the food. What else? What else do we do on a daily basis? Brushing your teeth counts as bath. Huh? We should, yeah. Okay. That's an interesting one.
Cleaning.
Cleaning.
Cleaning the house.
Cleaning the house.
Working.
Working. Oh, duty. How can we determine whether we are doing our duty as strictly as secondary? So duty is secondary, first of all. How do we make sure that we're actually tapped into the primary? Because there are these intervening results and there's a possibility of obstruction of the goal. So if we lose sight of it, so for example, if we're just very strict vegetarians and we think that's enough, we don't even know what the goal is. So how about with duty? How about with work? Are we just talking about work, or are we also talking about supporting family? Or duty in general, or are we going to branch it off in the...
Duty in general.
Duty in general. Okay, how are we to be sure that we're tapped into the primary and not just distracted by the secondary rule?
If we engage the results in Krishna's service.
Okay, engaging the result in Krishna's service. Okay, so in this scenario, we're performing an activity, we're getting something from it, that's the fruit, and we're using that in Krishna's service. Okay, that's good. Question, is it possible that the activity itself could also be used in Krishna's service? And if so, how?
If, let's say, you're a musician and
Okay.
The music that you do is kirtan,
Uh-huh.
say your nature, you just engage it for Krishna in the beginning of it, not just the result at the end.
Ah. Yeah, good. Because in one sense, say you're just, you're a musician and you appreciate Krishna, and you're using the fruits of that, and you engage it in Krishna's service. There was one fellow, his last name was Hari's son, and he did that. And his bandmates also did that. They donated a mansion, they did so many things. They recorded some really popular albums for the Hare Krishnas. And that's very good. And some of them, even more directly, just chanted Hare Krishna. Put them even in popular songs, so that's nice. So the more our consciousness is directed toward serving Krishna in whatever we're doing, the quicker we will achieve our goal, right? So we also have to see that there are gradations. There are ways to use some of the fruits to serve Krishna. There are ways to use more of the fruits to serve Krishna. There are ways to actually engage that thing in Krishna service. And there's the way to be completely, fully, only engaged in Krishna service, no matter what you're doing. So, and this requires detachment. Detachment is a very hard thing to come by in this material world because we're super attached to everything. And we have this tendency where we know that we have a goal, right? And we're told that you have to do something to get to that goal. So our tendency is, yeah, okay, I'm going to do something to get to that goal, and I'm going to be proud that I'm reaching that goal. But the way Krishna consciousness works is you do have to perform your duty, but you do not have the right to be attached. Because you're not actually responsible, or you're not the cause of the action. You have to perform the action in order to get it, but Krishna is the cause, right? So you see it like this. Krishna's mercy is like a rope that's extended down to us. And it's always there. We can always count on Krishna's mercy. Our endeavor is grabbing onto the rope, right? And then Krishna's pulling it up. If we take this upward movement of Krishna's as, oh, I did that, then that's not Krishna conscious, that's self-conscious. So it's a tough one, but we have to get from this mentality of I'm doing this to Krishna's doing this, and I hope that he gives me the strength to keep holding on, right? And so our whole process is redirecting our consciousness from that self-centric nature to the God-centric nature. Okay. Primary and secondary rules. I think we all have a good understanding of that. The direct result of the primary rules is worship of the Lord. Footnote 24. Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 23rd chapter, text 56. Anyone whose work is not meant to elevate him to religious life, anyone whose religious ritualistic performances do not raise him to renunciation, detachment, and anyone situated in renunciation that does not lead him to devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead must be considered dead, although he is breathing. So even religious life, renunciation, even being situated in renunciation, if it's not actually leading one to devotional service, then you're wasting your life, dead although breathing. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues. There are no intervening results between the rule and worship of the Lord. Chanting the Lord's name and hearing about him are two primary rules because their direct result is worship of the Lord, right? Because Krishna and his name are non-different. Whether we're perceiving him or not, that's another thing. But he's there when we say his name. We must always observe the primary rules, but if we do not observe the secondary rules, we cannot maintain the body properly nor our lives. If we cannot maintain our life, how can we follow the primary rules of devotional service? The secondary rules are the ornaments of a person's life. Material education, technology, industry, civilization, order, perseverance, bodily, mental, and social rules are accepted in that they may be used to bring humanity to serve the feet of the Lord sincerely. Being servants of the primary rules by the Lord's grace, they make human life blissful both during practice and perfection. There are many types of life. Primitive life, civilized life, life equipped with material sciences, atheistic moral life, theistic moral life, life endowed with Vaidhi Bhakti, and life endowed with Prema Bhakti. But the real life of a human being begins with theistic moral life. Without belief in God, so without Sambandha, human life is no better than that of an animal, no matter how much civilized or advanced in scientific knowledge or moral principles it may be. Because, before we go on, because that can seem harsh. Does anyone think that sounds harsh? Like, how are you going to call someone an animal just because they don't believe in God? They're trying to make society better. They're giving donations to homeless people. What, just because they're atheistic means they're not even humans? That seems pretty harsh, right? I have a brother, he's a really nice guy. He considers himself an atheist. I think he's more agnostic. I think the reason why he considers himself an atheist is because we have... Oh, I'm being recorded. That's probably okay. We have a sister who's a born-again Christian, and she thinks we're all going to hell. Sorry, she knows that we're all going to hell, and she feels really bad about it. And my brother's reaction to that is to just... it started in jest, like he would just start making fun of God, and and so he considers himself an atheist, but he's actually a very nice person. So, according to this, he's an animal. It seems a little harsh, right? But honestly, is it harsh? You're nodding. Why is it not harsh?
Because we're not doing anything different than animals do.
Not doing anything differently than animals do, because animals are just eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That's it.
We're not using this intelligence that we have.
Right, and if that's what we're doing, because even the animals, because it says in the beginning, toward the beginning, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur pointed out that every spirit soul has this same nature, the same tendency. Now, when you get to the human form of life, you get an opportunity to actually pursue that tendency. But if we don't, then animal life. So it's not harsh. It's reality. Yes, Mata.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For example, he explained these 5 levels, and he called it like Niti Shunya, then Nirishvaranaitika, and Seshvaranaitika means religious, moral theism. And then Sadhana Bhakta, and then next level is Bhava Bhakta. And here, now you told that if it means, sorry, my English is very bad. When we explain level of Seshvaranaitika, moral theism, they also have faith in God, but they they understand God through the karma and jnana. Means they doesn't have sambandha. Means they can we call it sambandha if they just believe in God, but they don't understand the real connection, like a soul, eternal servant of God.
We can call it incomplete sambandha because they understand that there's a relationship between them and God. To them, it could mean that they're quite close. Not close in the sense that the soul and the spirit soul are there, but close in qualification. But at least if they understand that they are somewhat inferior and God is superior, then that's a start. Gradually, it becomes clearer and clearer that there's a huge difference between us and God. That's given in the Shastra, but it's also quite obvious, right? Does that sound about right? So it's not necessarily a full understanding of Sambandha, but at least it's on the right track, knowing that the relationship that, because the Mayavadis, for example, although they say they sort of have a conception of God, it's illusory, it's offensive. So it's not Sambandha at all, yeah? Or would you call it just a really...
It is categorized because they're still considered theists because they follow the Shastra.
Uh-huh.
Within that, because they're pursuing on the path of spiritual, even those who think themselves, like meditate on themselves, or think God is also, still they're categorized among the spirituals.
Earlier they're characterized as irreligion.
I just try to clarify this point. Technically, can we call this connection on the level of karma that their knowledge is also Sambandha? Because as I understand from, I don't remember what book, that Sambandha Dhyana is the beginning of sadhana bhakti level. We can call it Sambandha Dhyana. But if it's about Seshvaranaitika, how we can technically call it? Will it be Sambandha because it's some connection, or it's not Sambandha in meaning of Lord Caitanya? Because it's not Sambandha in his meaning, how we can apply this term?
Yes, true. It's not, yes. So, essentially, just as I mentioned, it's at least understanding that there's a difference. We are inferior, he is superior. So it's a good start. But you're right, it's not fitting into the exact category that Lord Caitanya is describing, to actually know the relationship, the actual relationship, not just the idea of the relationship. Right, does that make...
I don't understand. Is it, was Lord Caitanya first who applied this terminology about Sambandha, Abhidheya, and Prayojana, and he explains this philosophy? Or before him, people who followed through, for example, Purva Mimamsa, or Jaimini Muni, for example, they had some explanation about some power beyond the past. Do they also call it Sambandha? And can we apply this word to, like, can we tell that in karma they Sambandha, like we are very different with Lord, and in Mayavada our sambandha that we are God, and we can't use this word for explaining karma in jnana philosophical approach.
Is the term used before? Do you know?
Not exclusively, I didn't go through exclusively like that, but whatever the aspects of Sambandha, what is taught by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that was existed before also, that Chitta, Chidishvara, and Kala and Karma, how they function in relation with each other. That was used even much before. But exactly using the terminology of categorizing all this as Sambandha, using the word, I didn't hear.
Okay. So, not clear. Means the principle was there of it, but not sure about the term, whether that's where it originated or not.
I asked because sometimes I give classes on these points, like what karma is, what jnana is, and I don't understand, and I don't know is right if I will use for the philosophical explanations this term, like sambandha, or it's not.
Yeah. So, many times there's overlap. So we have to understand what the concept is, and the way Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has been pointing this out is that anytime someone's at least on the right path, that they're actually getting closer to the truth, even if they're on a lower platform, then that's good and it should be encouraged. So there's overlap. So in one sense, you do consider it sambandha, but it's not mature sambandha, right? So it's one of those things where we don't want to get caught up on the term, because the term itself is also an external thing that's referring to the principle. And what the principle is that we have to understand our relationship with the Supreme Lord. Now, there's a lot of gray there. It's not that you just don't know it all and then you know. It's you don't know, you start to get an inkling, you realize, okay, I'm inferior, then you start realizing how inferior, and then what that actual relationship is. And so it's continuously growing. Does that make sense? So,
for example, in Islam, they consider that, yes, God exists, and they believe in God, but they consider themselves as body. And they don't understand the eternal nature and how they are servants of God like this. And can we tell that it's immature sambandha, or it's
incomplete.
not sambandha, incomplete, or it's
Incomplete
not sambandha perfectly?
Yeah. You want to say?
Yeah, in another place, I think it's in a lecture, Srila Prabhupada was discussing on that point, explaining all other religions, their sambandha with God is at most at the level of Brahman platform. Whether you take all the other religions, they touch the Brahman aspect of the Lord. Hardly only the Vedic religions can move higher to the level of Paramatma, and only the pure Vaishnava religions touch the Bhagavan aspect. Now, because the elements are there, there is Chit, Achit, and there is concept of Ishvara as Brahman, you can consider all theistic, moralistic people are, dealing with the aspects of Sambandha, but as Prabhu was pointing out, it's not complete. Because Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaneti, Shabdati, all three should be there if you're referring to him as absolute truth. If it is only Brahman, then it is incomplete. That's why there is always those inconsistencies. And when you're considering anybody as strictly theist, means he has to follow the Vedic scriptures. If he's not accepting the Vedas, then from the traditional school of Indian philosophy, they are not considered as theists. But here it is little more broad. Anybody who accept that there is a higher power than us and accept the Brahman feature of Lord will still consider. So there is always that zone is very grey in a sense. You can little bit extend, little bit go
So,
straight.
Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, it's non-dual, it's the same. But at the same time, we can divide it into three because there are three aspects. There's the all-pervading aspect, the localized aspect, and then the personal aspect. So it's still relationship, understanding the lower aspect, but it's not understanding the full relationship on the personal level. Does that make more sense? So it's simultaneously non-dual because it's all Krishna, but it's a different understanding. In other words, it's our capacity to understand him in these three levels. It's not that he splits himself in three for us, it's that we perceive him according to our understanding in these three phases. But for him, he's the same. So within our level of understanding, we will have an incomplete concept of Sambandha, but at least that's there and it's going to bring us forward. Is that clearer? Okay.
So we can tell that they have Sambandha with the lower aspect of absolute truth.
Yeah, you could say that. Good. Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more point is we can consider somebody in the theistic line as soon as they start discussing the difference between matter and spirit. That's how the second chapter of Gita starts.
Okay.
So anybody who is discussing like that is actually entering into theistic approach.
Mm.
But you can consider it strictly theistic when they have a clear delineation between,
Between matter and spirit.
Actually, Ishvara also, and then also there is Kala and Karma,
Mhm.
all the five aspects. So in the Vedic schools, only when you're discussing all the five, then you're considered as something very serious.
Thank you.
I think it was mentioned in Caitanya Siksamrita that when Lord Chaitanya was meeting with different people from different schools and beliefs, he would ask them two things. What is your sadhya? What is your sadhana?
Yeah.
What is the goal of your practice? And what is the practice with which you're going to?
Yeah.
Is how he would judge if their path is correct or not.
That comes like among the six schools, Vedanta. Only the Vedantic school has sadhana and sadhya. All other schools, the Sambandha is there, but there is no sadhana and sadhya defined. That's what comes in Jayadharma also, that when, what is his name, Rajana?
Mm.
Rajanath, he was a Nyaya scholar, and when he approaches Raghunath Das Babaji, he says, from your Nyaya learning, you understood the Sambandha is good, but there is no sadhana and sadhya defined there. So that's why it's inferior. Now you learn, and then that's when he teaches in Dashamula Tattva. And that discussion starts about.
Okay. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues. Real human life operates when a person accepts the rules and prohibitions of theistic moral life. Consequently, in this book, the discussion begins from this stage of life. Civility, morality, and material science are considered as ornaments to this life. How the theistic moral life culminates in devotional life will be discussed in this book. The real life of the living entity is called Jaiva Dharma, the soul's inherent nature. For the human beings, Jaiva Dharma is called Manava Dharma. Humankind's Dharma is of two types, secondary and primary, or incidental and inherent. Secondary or incidental Dharma takes shelter of matter, material qualities, and material relationships. The primary Dharma takes shelter of the pure soul. The primary Dharma is the Dharma of the soul. The secondary Dharma is of no value, being the transformation of the primary Dharma under the influence of material qualities. When the material qualities are removed, the Dharma of the soul exists purely as the primary Dharma. Secondary Dharma is also called conditioned Dharma. When the material conditions are removed, the primary dharma remains, right? So we have, the terms we were using before is we have our constitutional nature and we have our conditioned nature. And so the conditioned nature is because we misused our free will, because we have this false sense of self, the false ego, not the real sense of self, where I am servant of Krishna, but I am independent from Krishna. Since we misused that free will, we have been covered with multiple layers of the three modes of material nature. And this is what constitutes our conditioned nature. Our constitutional nature is pure spirit soul. We all have the same constitutional nature. And so this is pointing out that when we get rid of or purify the conditioned dharma, all that's left is that primary dharma, the pure state of the soul. Continuing. Secondary rules and prohibitions, piety, and avoidance of sins are included in the secondary dharma. The secondary dharma does not leave the soul, but matures into the primary dharma when the jiva is freed from the material modes. By an unnatural transformation of the primary dharma, the secondary dharma appears in the conditioned state. And by a positive transformation of the secondary dharma, the primary dharma appears again. After examining the secondary rules and prohibitions, the primary rules and prohibitions, and finally the perfected stage of the jiva, prema bhakti, will be discussed. So basically, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is giving a preview of what is going to be discussed in this book. In this first section, the words Lord, God, and Krishna have all been used. The reader should not think that these words refer to separate entities. Footnote 25, 1 to 11. We already quoted that. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. Krishna is the only form, the only object of worship by the soul. Krishna is the complete revelation of sweetness in God. When we consider Krishna in relation to other objects and need to emphasize his lordship, we use the word Lord. That is why in the beginning the word Lord was used instead of Krishna. Lordship is nothing more than the natural control that Krishna displays toward the objects of his creation. In enumerating the objects of creation, the word Lord is thus used. Chit, conscious entity, Achit, matter, and Ishvara, Lord, controller of both. Okay, so we will stop here. That's the end of part 1 of chapter 1. Are there any questions on that section?
I just want to ask, is that regarding Varnashrama Dharma and Sanatana Dharma?
Varnashrama Dharma?
Is the secondary Dharma, Varnashrama Dharma, and the primary Dharma, Sanatana Dharma?
That's right. Very good.
I wanted to see if it's not about something else now. Somewhere
Oh.
else. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we'll stop here. Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.